Again, welcome to the SMARTcurriculum Academy leadership webinars. I welcome this afternoon's guest, Frederica Roberts. Our webinar, our guest this afternoon has travelled the world in person and in these days virtually, speaking all over the globe on positive psychology and positive education. As a former teacher who left the profession due to stress, she is passionate about well-being in education and support schools to create environments where staff and students can flourish. I mean, that's the title of her new book. But the master's degree that she's currently working in applied positive psychology has developed a new model of whole school positive education, which she's doing further research on for a doctorate. And today's session, which will be interactive, she will include that model and share some examples from the schools around the world, from the whole school well-being and how it's in practice. So that's an introduction. So can I give a warm virtual welcome to Frederika Roberts, and I hand over to you to share with us on the subject. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Chris. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and hello everybody, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from in the world. So yes, I'm going to be talking about whole school well-being, the context within which that sits, why it's important, why it matters, and most importantly, how do we do it? So I'll share my model, and I'll also share, more importantly, some examples of great practice from around the world. So we'll start by looking at the context, really, and I'm sure you're probably all too familiar with these stats, but I think it's important to sometimes remind ourselves of why well-being is so important. And of course, my goodness, we've had such a year, 2020, so it's more important than ever. And I'll share some stats around staff in a bit in terms of how that's already shown an impact. But if we think about children, 20%, 1 in 5 worldwide who have some kind of mental health disorder. So this is diagnosed and diagnosable mental health disorders. And if we look at the UK, Australia and the USA, the picture is not that different in different countries. It is a problem that we're all sharing. So as educators, it's part of our role. We spend so much time with children in schools. It's part of our role to try and stem that tide and support their well-being. So if we look at staff, well, how do staff support children if they're not well themselves? The good old analogy of the oxygen mask on a plane, or, you can't pour from an empty cup. There might be cliches, but they're repeated over and over for a reason, because they are true. Teachers cannot adequately support children if they're not well themselves. And here in the UK, where I'm based, the 2019 Teacher Wellbeing Index, commissioned by the Education Support Partnership, showed staggering figures, which year on year they're not much different, and if anything they get worse, but nearly 3/4 of professionals in education consider themselves to be stressed, and when you look at school leaders, that percentage is actually even higher. And the Education Support Partnership did commission a study earlier this year in April looking at the impact of COVID on teachers, and you can see there that over half of primary school teachers felt higher stress levels than usual, and just under half of secondary school teachers did. And I suspect that picture is probably very similar elsewhere around the world, and particularly actually as we've moved on and schools have perhaps, after being closed for a while, reopened, depending on different settings in different countries. There are all sorts of stresses, and I talk to teachers and educators all day, every day, pretty much, and the picture I'm getting is that the stress levels are sky high. So it's not to paint a really gloomy picture, but the reality of where this sits, really. So we'll start looking at the why and the how, but first of all, I'd like to find out a little bit about you so that I know, oh no, I'll tell you a little bit about why first. So yes, there are people who don't believe that well-being belongs in education. We see that they're quite vocal on social media as well, and you do encounter them on your travels from time to time. And I think there is a fear there that if we start putting well-being into education explicitly, implicitly, it takes time, and that will take time away from actually working on academic stuff. But actually, if you look at, there's loads of research, and by the way, I'll send you through Nikki a PDF copy of these slides, so you'll have a full reference list so you can look up the research for yourselves as well. That the research actually supports globally that if you focus on well-being, then it's not an either or, then the academic achievement follows and gets better. So positive psychology and positive education has been shown to protect against mental health disorders, and also to improve academic results. So it's a win-win when you do focus on well-being in education. And if you look at the IPEN, the International Positive Education Network, they describe positive education with a double helix. So they actually talk about intertwining, educating for academic achievement and educating for well-being, and very importantly, character development, because character and character strengths are a fundamental building block of positive psychology. So really important element of well-being to actually support people with their character development. And that's whether it's students or staff. So now, hopefully, I will be finding out a little bit about you. Yes. So if you go to menti.com, so of course you can do it on a browser on your computer, but if you want to be able to keep seeing the slide as it becomes populated, then perhaps if you have a handheld device, a tablet or a phone that you can do it on. So if you go to menti.com, and it will ask you for a code. You don't need any spaces when you put the code in. It's 5068114, and that'll take you through to the first question. Once you've answered the question, by the way, don't close that browser, because every time we go to a different slide where I need you to interact with Menti, it will automatically give you the next question. So keep that open. So hopefully we'll start seeing some bars coming up in terms of where you're based. I've included an option of not based in a school, because some of you might be working for local education authority or for other organizations that are linked to education but not necessarily based in one school. So just let me know what your setting is, and while you do that, I'll tell you a little bit about my sort of teaching background. So I taught in secondary schools. I taught French and German to 11 to 16-year-olds before I left through extreme stress. And now, having previously vowed I'd never set foot in a school again, I spend an awful lot of my time in schools, although at the moment virtually. And I have worked with children typically aged 8 to 18. And I've worked with their teachers and also non-teaching staff, and that's been really staff in schools all the way from early years, so from 3 and 4-year-olds all the way to 18-year-olds. And I have also worked with parents and delivered training sessions for parents, anything from short presentations to actual interactive workshops with parents as well, and again across the age ranges there. So my background in education really ticks a lot of those potential bar charts for you. So hopefully, if you've got any problems with accessing the Menti, let me know, but hopefully we should be seeing some results starting to come through. I'll just double check on my browser. Okay, they are coming through, but they're not showing on there, so just bear with me while I try and refresh that, because for some reason it's not come through. Okay, here we go. Sometimes it can be a little bit temperamental. Brilliant. So, okay, so we've got a bit of a mixture, but half and half, sort of most of you either in primary schools or not based in school, and then we've got somebody from all the way through and somebody in secondary school. So a good mixture, and the examples I'll be talking about today go across the age range. So thank you for that. It's always good to know who's in the room. So if you now go to Menti again, you should be seeing a next question, which is, where are you based? And hopefully hopefully this one will come through without problems. So apologies if you're not from the UK, Australia or the USA. When Chris and Nikki sent information through about who was going to be here, those were the key locations that seemed to come through. So to keep it simple, I put those 3 down. If it is other, however, do feel free to type into the chat and let me know where you're from. It's always good to know where people are based as well. So I'll just double check that it isn't my app that's not feeding through. Okay, so for some reason it just doesn't want to refresh each time, but we're getting there. So hopefully that'll now come through. Here we go. It obviously wants to, so all UK based at the moment. Okay, well, that keeps it nice and easy for me. I don't have to translate ages and year groups, etc. But if anybody joins us as we go along, that might change, of course. So thank you for that. Right, so let's have a look then. And I've noticed Claire Probert has walked in as well. So hello, Claire, because I'll be talking about you and your amazing work later on. So you're one of the examples that I'm sharing. So why a whole school approach? Why don't we just do a one-off intervention? Why don't we just do, you know, a well-being course or an, you know, an assembly with kids or something like that? Why a whole school approach? I'm not going to read all that out to you because you will have it to read when I send you the PDF, but I just wanted to kind of highlight what I thought was interesting here is that this was written by Public Health England and not the Department for Education. And it's really talking about the whole school approach, pervading all aspects of school. And you'll notice things that I've highlighted there: culture, ethos and environment, learning and teaching, and partnerships with families and the community. So it really is every aspect of school life that they're talking about. And then when we look at the research by Weir, it's, you know, the potential to have an incredible impact on preventing and reducing mental health problems as well as supporting academic success is enormous, but it needs to be done properly. So it can't just be a tick list of just ticking off activities and go, right, we've done well-being. It needs to be in every aspect of the school. And again, Seligman et al. In their 2018 Global Positive Education Report talk about actually schools have a role to play in promoting a culture of well-being in society as a whole. It's about the human beings that come out of the school system as well. So that's why it's important as well to have positive schools. And finally, I mentioned earlier character, so I needed to bring up really the Jubilee Centre for Character and Virtues based at the University of Birmingham. And again, they talk about character education permeating all subjects, all the school activities and the general ethos as well of the school. So it really is about everything that's happening. Okay, so hopefully I'll probably have to refresh again. If you go back to Menti, before I share my model with you and the elements that I think should be included, obviously there's a few hints in terms of some of the slides I've just shared about some of the elements, but I want you to write down, and this is free text, so you can write as many things as you want. Each time you submit, it'll give you the option to submit again, and it'll come up on little boxes on our screen. What elements should we include? What should we consider and think about when we're talking about whole school positive education? So go back to the Menti and I'll just do a quick refresh again just to make sure that everything's working. This might take a bit longer because you've got to actually type rather than tick, so I'll be patient and let you do that. I can see that stuff is coming through but not feeding live, so here we go. Menti can be a little bit temperamental, I've found out. So I will refresh again because I can see there's more coming through, but keep writing them in and then we'll look once we've got a few. Okay, and obviously when I share the PDF of this presentation with you, you will have the answers as well, so that you can see what you all replied as well. Okay, so there's loads coming through now. So let's have a look at some of those. So I'll just look over there. So sensible workloads, yeah, for both teachers and learners. That's a really important point, actually. The workload is for both. And I suppose nowadays for parents, as they seem to be very involved as well at home. Connecting with others, yeah, relationships are really important. Emotional awareness, yeah, emotional intelligence, well-being, yeah, evidence-based models such as PERMA and SEARCH. So yeah, Lee Waters with SEARCH and Seligman with PERMA, of course. Staff well-being, stakeholder support, engagement, curriculum design. Yes, 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 absolutely. I think you can write my model for me. No surprises there, but hopefully you'll like how I've represented it. Okay, so I'll just share with you the model. Oh my goodness, the technology is just not playing today. Right. I will just close that and come back in. So the model that I have developed is the LEAF, Learn and Flourish model of whole school positive education. And the way I've developed that is I've basically looked at, here we go, talking and multitasking. Here we go. Okay, so the LEAF, Learn and Flourish model of whole school positive education. When I did my master's in applied positive psychology, which I completed last year, my dissertation was all about developing this model. So I basically looked at all the models that are out there of whole school positive education, things like Geelong Grammar School, things like REACH, etc. And I plotted them on a massive chart and looked at what they all involved, what they're trying to achieve, what they included and what they didn't include. And what I attempted to do is to pull together a model that would take all of the best and essential elements out of all of those, but put them all together into one model. And that's what the LEAF model does, basically. So the way it does that, if you have a look at the brown leaves that you can see there, they are the aims of the model. So very similar to IPEN. So you've got academic achievement as one of the leaves, and we've got student well-being and mental health, which includes character development, and then staff well-being and mental health, which includes character. So I wanted to make sure that we really focus on students and staff within the schools and not just one or the other. The other leaves are then all the different elements, the kinds of stuff that you were writing onto that Menti slide. So, you know, the parental involvement, the policy, the ethos, the leadership, the community, the way that you teach about well-being, things like PERMA, etc., embedded teaching, as well as explicit well-being teaching and so on, as well as staff training, etc. So those are all the elements. And then the trunk is the evaluation. So the trunk is basically, the idea is that evaluation works both ways. You start off by evaluating what you need, you carry out stuff, you evaluate whether it works, you tweak it, you evaluate again, but also the trunk goes into the soil, and that's where the policy sits. So ideally we want that to be fertile. Sometimes it isn't as fertile as we'd like it to be in terms of supporting well-being in education, but we can feed back through evaluation. We can actually nourish that soil of policy and provide more evidence of what works to policymakers. And policy can also be at school level as well. So it's, again, feeding that. And then the roots are basically all the different elements. So things like PERMA, things like character strengths, physical health as well. So if you take PERMA and add the H for health at the end, emotional development, resilience, etc. Those are all the roots. So these are all the things that you kind of feed into this tree to achieve the objectives and to make sure that you're reaching well-being in all the domains that the leaves cover. So that's the basic principle of it. And now I'm going to talk you through some of the examples of it. Okay. So I'm going to start with the UK. And in the UK, I'm going to talk about 1 school and 2 academy trusts. So the University of Birmingham School was set up as part of a government drive for universities to get more involved in setting up and running free schools. And the Jubilee Centre for Character and Virtues, based at the University of Birmingham, had a lot of input into that. So it was set up in 2015 with the main aim to create a diverse and inclusive school community that would serve the city well, and where character education would carry the same weight as academic success. And they really wanted to create better citizens as a result of this and allow students and staff to flourish. So again, you see the link there between the character driver and well-being. In terms of some of the leaves then on the LEAF model, initial teacher training, there is a secondary university training school, so trainee teachers have that direct link between university and the school. In terms of staff well-being, they offer 10 inset days to all of their staff, and they've changed the setup of meetings and CPD so that it's within the school day rather than tagged onto the end of the school day for staff, and staff can pursue their passions by offering anything they want to within reason for the pupil enrichment program as well. In terms of that trunk, the evaluation, well, they are obviously very closely linked with the university and with the Jubilee Centre and their research output. So they've been very actively involved in continuous evaluation of what they do. They've taken part in short-term impact studies as well as longitudinal studies. So some of those obviously won't be published yet, but there's always evaluation going on in terms of what they do. In terms of the leadership leaf, absolutely 100% committed to what they're trying to achieve. And really championing character throughout the school. Now, the physical environment, I appreciate that if you don't build a school from scratch, that might feel a bit harder to do, but I've spoken to lots of school leaders and teachers where they've actually done a lot with very old buildings. So you can still do a lot to give people ownership over the environment and give them a sense of pride in where they go to school and where they work, so that they take that ownership and look after their well-being in terms of looking after where they spend most of their time as well. But at the University of Birmingham School, they're obviously very lucky because they were able to set that up from scratch. So they're very strong on social mobility. So for the sixth formers, they basically set up science labs that are very much like university science labs. A lot of their lessons are designed in a lecture style and taught in a lecture theatre type environment to get students used to the notion of going to university. And they also, the sixth formers, use a library that's within the university campus. And in fact, the school sits pretty much within the university campus as well. They have character quotes on plasma screens around the school so that they can be easily changed, and children are encouraged to contribute to those, so to come up with quotes and information they want to go on there. So that ownership leaf in the leaf model as well. And their art rooms are designed for optimal lighting with brilliant massive floor to ceiling windows, but all in the right direction, beyond my understanding of the kind of light you need as an artist, but they've set it up with that in mind. And they have accessible gender neutral toilets on every floor, for example. So they've really thought about all of that well-being throughout. In terms of the embedded stuff around well-being teaching and character teaching, they have an extensive enrichment program to provide students with challenge and opportunity every step of the way, but they're expecting a commitment as well once they choose an activity, so they'll do it for a certain number of weeks, so it kind of teaches them about stickability as well there. Their behaviour management is all about taking responsibility as well for their behaviour and building on those character strengths. There's a lot of role modelling, so a lot of the visibility leaf there as well. So for example, they have staff workbases on every floor that have glass walls so that students can actually see what hard work looks like when their teachers and other staff aren't standing in front of them but just sitting in an office working. And there is a large atrium at the centre of the school where staff and students have lunch together, and when it's not lunchtime, it's also a study space for the sixth formers so that the younger students can see that sort of independent learning role modelled as well and build on that. I know that Rebecca Teague, the head of school, is always open to welcoming visitors, so if you do want to go and have a look at the school and you have the opportunity to, obviously circumstances with COVID permitting, then do contact Claire, because it's a great school to go and visit. So I'll come to the two Academy Trusts that I've worked with, the Challenger Multi-Academy Trust and the Leo Academy Trust. I worked with Challenger from 2018 to 2019, and that's how I met Chris as well. And then I'm working now with the Leo Academy Trust, have done since 2019. They came to a presentation that we did with the Challenger Multi-Academy Trust and engaged my business to work with them. It was the predecessor of Educate to Flourish, the CIC that I run now. And I'm working with them until probably at least another couple of years, because we've got ongoing projects at the moment. So Challenger Multi-Academy Trust have got 3 primary and 4 secondary schools, and within those they've also got in one of the primary schools at Lancott and in one of the secondary schools they've got a small centre to support children with social, emotional, mental health needs and or barriers to learning. And they have character running through the trust, really. They have the Challenger Diploma, where creativity and skills development is encouraged. They can volunteer and do community projects. They can go on trips and events. There are sports activities, all of this building up to their Challenger Diploma. There's loads more. And they engaged me and my business to basically work with them on action research projects. So again, thinking about that evaluation trunk of the model, of evaluating what you do and re-evaluating. So I worked with a number of their staff across the trust where they carried out projects. We supported them with how to do that from a research perspective, as well as supporting them with coming up with what kinds of projects they might want to do around character and well-being. And Claire can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe one of the projects that was done with one of the year groups at Lancott around character and maths confidence was so successful that it's been rolled out to the rest of the school in terms of using character strengths to support children's learning in maths. So Claire?
Hello.
Is that right?
Yeah, a couple of the things actually stemming from the work we did with you now run throughout our whole school because it was so successful. So
oh, wow. That's good. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I'll have to have a catch up with you then, Claire, and find out what more's been happening. And actually, you know, if Claire was on camera, she'd probably blush now. So, but I just want to mention some of the work that Claire's done at Lancott, actually specifically, because I use Claire as a case study in my book for Flourishing's sake. So if you want to read more about it, there's loads in there. But Claire's determined and very courageous, may I say, leadership has really transformed the way that they teach. The wows that they do in Lancott in terms of a thematic approach to the curriculum is phenomenal. And again, I'm sure Claire's quite happy to talk to people about what they do. And I know that they've, in the past, when we could just go around schools, they had lots of people going around there. And it goes all the way through in terms of a cross-curricular approach, and Claire's really keen, I know, on showing children what life could be like and giving them opportunities, and everything they do is character-centric. So I'll move on and spare Claire's blushes now, but I'll move on to the Leo Academy Trust, where we've also been working on action research projects, which got kind of interrupted a little bit by COVID, but the staff are persevering and are actually taking that whole evaluation thing, looking at what was working, what wasn't, and then moving, you're very welcome, Claire, and then moving into a new phase of their research based on what they've learned. So they've taken the disruption of COVID mid-project, a lot of them, and gone, okay, well, actually, we had an opportunity to see what worked and didn't work, so let's tweak the projects, and they've restarted their projects now. So their reports will be ready next summer, and we're starting in the spring with a new cohort of researchers as well. I should mention, in terms of coming back to Challenger as well, that there is a report. I have a beautiful printout, but it's available via PDF. So when Nikki emails you after this session, there will be a little bit of a message from me, and part of that is how to get in touch if you'd like me to send you a copy of this report. So here's the Challenger Multi-Academy Trust report. It's really good reading in terms of the work that they've done, which is fantastic. So Leo will be doing something similar, but it'll be next summer when it's out. But they're also engaged in a comprehensive program, trust-wide, of actually putting well-being at the heart of the entire trust. So I'm talking to them at the moment about different ways of doing that as well, as a trust-wide approach. They've already been doing fantastic work with staff dedicated in the leadership team for the trust and the schools to staff well-being and pupil well-being. They're also looking at how to increase the parent element there as well. So there's some great work going on at a whole school and whole trust level there. So I'll quickly move on to a different country. I'll move on to the US and Breakthrough Magnet School South, which is in Connecticut. And they are what they'd call a pre-K to 8th grade. So early years, 3-year-olds all the way through to about 13, 14. So it would be about our year 8, 9 here. Yeah, year 9, I think. And they have, they're part of Magnet Schools of America. So they have a very character-centric approach that's quite unusual. They are state funded, but their places are allocated on a lottery basis. So you have to apply for your children, and there are very few places compared to the number of applications. They're very popular. So when parents obtain a place for their children, they have to make a commitment to the ethos and value of the Magnet Schools. And part of that is that for the first month of their child being in that school, the parents attend a training session once a week for the first month. But this is also reciprocated in terms of access. So Julie Goldstein, who was principal there when I interviewed her for my book, and who's now moved to another Magnet School to continue her great work, she gave all the parents her mobile number so that they could communicate with her at any time about their children, which is a brave thing to do. The school has been recognised for its climate and culture, so that's another one of the leaves by Teach for America. Their academic results, so Hartford, Connecticut, where they're based, is one of the poorest cities, if not the poorest city in Connecticut. Their student population is 75% free school meals, very high ethnic minority, a lot of disadvantaged children and teens really as well that would typically perhaps not do so well academically, but their results are exceptional because of all the focus on well-being and character that they have there. They encourage community work, and they encourage children to take ownership. So even very young children do some fantastic independent projects to support the local community. They have a dedicated well-being curriculum as well, and all their policies, from restorative practices for staff and pupils to their recruitment processes to make sure that staff that join the school are engaged in their ethos. It's all the way through, so you can see kind of all the different leaves of the LEAF model in practice there. And then one final example before I get you to do some interactive work again is Sunmark School in Dubai. So this is slightly different because this is an international school, so it's a fee-paying school, and it's all the way through from 3 to 18. And they were actually set up brand new. They're part of a group of 2 schools, but this one was the second one they set up from scratch after they had trainers from Geelong Grammar School go over there and train the staff in positive education. So Geelong Grammar School in Australia is where the term positive education was coined, and they do offer some state-of-the-art training based on the work of Marty Seligman, who actually brought it into Geelong Grammar School back in 2008. So they had that training, they set up the school from scratch, and they have 3 tiers when it comes to their positive education provision. They have the organisational tier, which is things like the systems, procedures, policies, etc. They have the proactive tier, which is the implicit and explicit teaching of well-being. And they have the responsive tier, which is the targeted intervention. So you can see some of the leaves of the model, of the LEAF model, sort of fit into those tiers. So physical environment, which is one of the leaves of the LEAF model, it's very light, lots of indoor and outdoor spaces for mingling. I suspect the outdoor spaces are coming in really handy at the moment. They have a Zen garden for relaxation. They have a dark carpeted well-being room with fairy lights and cushions and yoga mats as well. They have state-of-the-art sports facilities. In terms of the embedded stuff that they're doing, so the implicit teaching of well-being, it's all the way through the school. So just some examples in early years, for example, the children have what they call their kindness elf that helps them spot strengths in their classmates and recognize those. They also, when they come in the morning, they pick up their name tag and they put it underneath the emotion that matches how they feel at that point and what mood they're in. So they're recognizing from a very early age how to categorize and describe their emotions. And other things they do, they have peer counselling, for example. They have something called the Sports Heroes Academy, where they have 120 students that actually deliver sports training to 120 students with special educational needs and disabilities from across all of the United Arab Emirates, and they do all of that for free. That's one of their sort of community involvement projects that children get involved with. In terms of targeted interventions, they have a wellbeing survey every year so that they can spot issues early and target support. They have counsellors, psychologists, and a positive psychologist as well. And restorative justice is very big in the school as well. They have 40 minutes a week in all age groups to actually teach them positive education. So that's the explicit teaching about well-being, and all their staff, not just teaching staff, receive CPD into positive education as well. So the training runs throughout. So what I'd like to do now is to invite you to actually have a discussion. There's not many of us, so we might as well do it in this room rather than going into breakout rooms. So if we could spend between 5 and 10 minutes, we can have a really kind of good chat about experiences that you've either had in your own schools, where you teach, where you work, or experiences you've seen perhaps as a parent. So that includes as well, Nikki and Chris, any sort of experience of working with schools, etc. I'd like to hear your experiences of some of these elements of whole school well-being that may be reflected in what you've seen or done yourselves. So over to you, really.
So you can either put something in the chat and then we can work through, or if you want to turn your microphone on and engage in a part of the conversation, please do so now. So if you turn your microphone on, Claire, is there something that you can tell us about Lancot while you're here?
That would be great. Yes, please, Claire.
You can just go. I know you may not be around for the full time, but just is there something that you can tell us?
Yeah, I'll come on camera. I'm not camera ready, but I feel a little bit rude now. Saying hi, Fred.
Hi, lovely to see you.
And you. I mean, Fred summed it up quite well. And obviously, I think our approach at Lancot has been that it really does need to be embedded in every part of school life. You know, none of this is purely curriculum based, purely extracurricular, purely having a wellbeing team and having meetings about it. It's something that just is part of your school and therefore becomes a part of every decision that's made and every single thing that you do. So it does take a long time to embed, to get it really right and to get it felt by your whole school community. But the power, once you've achieved that, or once you're continuing on that journey, I think that's the most powerful thing you can do as a school leader.
Claire, I know when we've talked, you've mentioned sort of, you know, that it's taken a lot of courage actually to do that and to make that big change and to bring people on board. And it's not been an easy journey every step of the way. And maybe it's quite important to address that as well, because it's all well and good looking at the almost finished product. I mean, I know it's ongoing, but looking at all the wonderful results, and it's great to hear about those. But also, I think it's really important to talk about the challenges along the way, because like most things that are worthwhile, they're not always easy to achieve. So are you happy to share some of those challenges? Because it's been a journey that's taken a few years for you, hasn't it?
Oh, we've had many challenges. And to put that into context, when I took over in my current role, it was when the school was category 4. So, you know, that's about as many challenges as you can face. And in that sense, it probably made it easier for me being new to headship. But I think, I mean, it's very kind you say it's a brave approach, a brave way forward. But I think if you passionately believe in it, you have to understand that to get buy-in, it's not going to happen just because you introduce something or because you believe in it. You have to actually implement it and allow it to settle and take that backlash, take that, the fear and anxiety some people might have because of the change or because you're doing something a little bit different. And you have to stay strong. You've got to stay resolute and know that you've got your vision. You know what you want to achieve, and you're not going to be knocked from that. You listen, you take feedback. You can't be defensive, but you can't expect quick change. You have to just stay strong to the path you're choosing to take your school on, and I guess in that sense have your close contacts that keep you going and give you that positive lift on the darker days. And it's not until a few months later, I'm a very honest person, I can tell you in that first year, I probably went home so many times. I remember just unloading the dishwasher and literally being in tears because I thought, what am I doing? You know, this is so hard. But, you know, a month later, 3 months later, a year later, you look back and you think, that's changed. Ah, that's better. Wow, I'm seeing an impact. But yeah, you have to be in it for the long haul, and then it's beautiful after that.
So in terms of the beauty then, obviously you've got some parents that perhaps were parents that had very young children in the school when you started this journey and that have seen the development of it. And you would have had parents at the beginning, I suppose, who might have been skeptical and only been around for a year or so of that journey. And also staff that have perhaps been around since the beginning and since before and seen the change. So can you give some examples of sort of some of that magic in terms of the children, the staff, the parents, you know, some of these things that make it all worthwhile, because obviously it is really hard, but it's, you know, the stuff that makes it worthwhile at the end, really.
I think there's always some very magical moments. I know that yourself and Chris have actually been a part of this more than perhaps you realise, but our curriculum design means we do have some key dates throughout the year that we call WOW celebrations, and that's where all of the learning journeys come together. And that really is the moment when you see all of those children and the progress they've made and the pride in what they're doing and the pride in their school and the staff as well. It's literally the whole school community. We've, you know, sold out theatres with every single one of our children performing. And that speaks for itself because the parents are there. The parents are seeing it for themselves. So to me, it's about involving parents in that journey and letting it speak for itself. You haven't got to prove anything. You just got to be open and let them see what their children are doing and how happy their children are. And the same with the staff. You know, I'd look at my staff on those days and just think, I know this is getting to you every bit as much as it's getting to me. And it's just that emotional buzz of you're doing the right thing by the children and you're actually seeing it there in front of your eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
Fred, can I bring in there? Because I know, you know, having been on part of the journey with Claire and you know, your involvement too, and from my days in school leadership, I remember that I just thinking from your book, you know, having read the parts, the setting the tone, enabling the staff to create the environment and the climate is key to this moving forward. It doesn't just happen, you have to make it happen. I know, having sat in Claire's office and worked through with her staff, that it's really key. And the truth is that there are some staff who don't see it. And, you know, you need coaching alongside, or, you know, all the other practices to enable them to do it. And some will engage and some decide, I want a different way. And I would articulate it. And from my own experience, if you have a climate of engaged people with a purpose-driven ideal, and the purpose is to create the environment that works. And there are others that have such a rule-based economy that everything's based on you should and you shouldn't. That there will be people who just in the cycle will say, actually, I'm not comfortable with this. I need to move on. And any leader in a school, in a way, needs to just say, okay, but this is what we are. This is where we are. And if your place is better suited elsewhere for their own well-being, they probably need to make that step as well. So it's being realistic with the people and managing them with that goal of working for their well-being. And if it doesn't work for them, then there will be a place where they can work and feel comfortable. And is that fair, Claire? Because you know, I'm trying to put it politically you know, well.
No, that was that was put perfectly. I would say that actually we had significant staff changes in the first few years of my headship. And I think sometimes there's the assumption that is a negative experience on one side, if not on both sides, when exactly as you've just explained, you know, you can have the highest quality staff with hopefully a highly effective leadership team and in a thriving school. But if you don't mesh, then you're not going to get to that point that you're all trying to reach. And there's no shame in admitting that. I think people have to decide whether it's the right fit or the wrong fit. And then sometimes people leaving is because they will then be much happier in the path that they've chosen. And sometimes that does settle the school if there is, less need to persuade, or, it can gel better, but that's not a negative. It's just people need to be honest and open about what they're looking for and what it is that the school needs.
Yeah. That's about finding our place, isn't it? And that's a lot to do with well-being. As I read in your book, Fred, that is about finding your place.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've experienced that as well as a teacher, working in a variety of primary schools. And when I moved to a different borough, going to a different primary school, and I'd come from such an amazing team. It was a really, really challenging area in terms of the intake of the school, but it really felt like we were all on the same page and we were all facing that challenge together. And then I moved to a different school in Kent, and I couldn't believe how soul destroying it was for me, really, in a very short space of time. And luckily it was only a maternity cover. But it just wasn't that feeling of everybody's, yes, you've got different teaching styles and you've got somebody who's really good at that, and but everybody was still aiming for the same thing. And if there was a problem, people would deal with it in the same manner. And it felt like you would have support if there was a behavior issue or somebody was really had a big problem. And that just wasn't there in this other school. It didn't feel like you were a team. And so I think that's where the embedded well-being just wasn't set.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see the two varieties of that, isn't it? And how that can make a difference. And that's really where the sort of culture of the school really comes into it. I think, you can really, it's palpable when you walk into a school. And when I've walked around Lancot and when I've walked around other schools where they do this really brilliantly, you can just tell when you walk into the school that staff, they might be stressed because of just being in the job that they're in. It's never a bed of roses every single day, but you can see that they're happy doing what they're doing, and that the children are happy and the children are confident. I think it's really interesting as a visitor when you go into a school, because you can see schools where well-being is really high, because the children kind of tend to come up to you and just tell you about stuff that they're doing, and there's just this kind of vibrancy about them that you don't see in all schools, unfortunately. So I think it makes a huge difference. And it's, obviously my vision is let's change the world and all schools should be doing this, and but that's where the evaluation stuff comes in, and the constant kind of providing the evidence base, and it's a long process. Claire's talked about how long a process it is and how arduous it is to do that in one school. If we want to do it at a national level and at an international level, well, boy, have we got a task ahead of ourselves, but it's one school at a time, winning the hearts and minds. But for a lot of people, winning the hearts and minds, if they haven't got that intrinsic desire to bring in a different way of doing education, then it's about winning them over with the data and the evidence and showing what works. And
can I ask you that? Sorry, Fred, can I say on that one, because you refer in your book to the Nicky Morgan book, which obviously she was very involved in
character,
in character education, the Jubilee Centre. But obviously, as education minister, she would have been very driven and was very driven about the performance data. In terms of the research and the data that you're looking into, is there a feel for how, because in making the case for a school leader to take on this kind of LEAF model, there's a kind of return on investment that's needed. Is there a feel yet for, with a good level of engagement from a staff body, how quickly a school would see the kind of improvement results? I know, because having worked with Claire, we've seen that within the primary sector and what she's seeing, and it is a gradual rise, isn't it, Claire?
It is,
would be, it's not
Absolutely.
overnight and it changes. But is there a feel in the data yet to see how that's impacting schools?
I wouldn't be able to give you any exact sort of data on timescales. It does take time, as you say, you know, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but I think depending on what's been done and where you're starting from, you know, I think some schools can start seeing some green shoots of improvement within 1 or 2 academic years, you know, because we're not talking decades, we're talking a reasonable amount of time, but it's not an impossible amount of time in terms of doing this. Yeah.
2 years is you know, I know you're not saying it's going to be 2 years, but again, it depends on the level of people in being involved. But I'll just say, Claire, thank you for being here. I know you've got to move on. Thank you,
Claire.
We'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Real pleasure. Thanks for getting involved.
And Jane, by the way, if you do want to join in, do join in. We're kind of just talking, so let's have a chat.
Jane is having some difficulties with her internet. Sorry, just reading a note. So I'll just say, if you've got questions, just put them in the chat. That may be a way of doing it, and we can speak them for you. So, Fred, just go back to that point about change. I mean, that seeing differences in 1 or 2 years is something where people that are looking for immediacy. I know that's where the pressure is on, and it isn't the life cycle of a group of learners in a school. So 7 years for a primary school in the UK, or maybe 5 or 7 years in a secondary school. But to see that change over time, I know from my experience, you know, schools can change within that period of time. Not to necessarily the goals that you might have, but they, you know, culture changes and can change within that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And the academic results obviously can, because, you know, that there is always going to be an element of testing and assessment academically, you know, at least once a year and on a significant scale. So, you know, depending on when you start this process of change and how committed you are to it, you know, it can be seen. I mean, one of the pieces of research that's referenced in the reference list in the slides that I'll send across is the doctoral research that was done by Alejandro Adler under Martin Seligman, and he worked with the government of Bhutan on a resilience program in schools, and it was really successful within a very short space of time, so much so that he then took it to Mexico and to Peru. And you know, this is data from thousands and thousands of children, and the impact, the positive impact that working on their resilience has had in terms of their academic results. So there is a lot of data already out there that people can refer to internationally. I think what we need to do in this country is to contextualize it for something that the Department for Education in the UK can kind of relate to really give them that evidence. And the way I look at it is, you know, we might not all be in it for the same reasons. You know, the DFE might be in it for the grades. There might be some school leaders, some teachers that are really wholly focused on the academic grades and not really on the well-being in its own right. Now, others, you know, like me, are probably completely on the other side of kind of, it's not that grades don't matter, but I think we should do well-being for the sake of doing well-being, because, you know, we're hoping to bring flourishing humans out of that system that can actually enjoy life to the full. But somewhere in the middle of that is you have to play a little bit of a game, I think. And if you're wanting to do well-being for the sake of well-being, but you know that actually well-being work is worth it in terms of academic results, then you need to think about who makes the decisions and who puts money into education, and do the research and provide the evidence base that this stuff does actually do the, you know, bring the results in terms of academic achievement, because then you can still do it for your own reasons, but you're actually providing the data that the policymakers want. And I think that's the game that we have to play if we want to achieve change. And that's why the evaluation trunk is so important in the model. Yeah.
So yes, absolutely. And I think that's, and certainly in interactions that I've had over the last few weeks with school leaders, there is an understanding of that. And one of the things that I've commented on is that we tend to have quite a binary perception of these things. In this case, it's either performance or well-being. The truth is that, you know, as human beings, we're not more blended than that, and we can have both, and it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Exactly.
Our behaviours can create that perception and position, but actually it shouldn't be that way.
Absolutely, and actually the more we look at it as it's not an either or, but it's both, the more we will achieve more of both. Because you know, if you think about the PERMA model that Seligman has about well-being, so positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning and achievement, there is achievement there. You know, achieving well is part of being well. It's part of well-being. So if you achieve good academic outcomes and then later on good career outcomes, etc., that will feed your well-being. But equally, if you feed the well-being elements, it will feed the achievement. So it is the two go together, which is why I love the simple iPen double helix so much, and which is why I wanted to bring that into my own model, to kind of have the two really interlinked and being essential to, you know, the three leaves in my model, which is the academic achievement, staff well-being, mental health and character, and pupil well-being, mental health and character, because they have to go together.
Yeah, absolutely. Fred, we're drawing to the sort of last 5 minutes. If there were some sort of points to capture and walk away with, can you leave us with some sort of snapshots and things that you know, kind of things to hold on to, some hooks to
Absolutely, yes. And then before I go, I will also share a little offer as well that will go out by email, but I'll mention it here as well because people might watch the recording. But really what I would say is, you know, being courageous is really important, and trusting in what you're doing, as Claire was talking about so beautifully. You know, if you know that you're on the right track, it's not going to happen overnight, but it is worth the effort. And if you can back that up with data to satisfy the policymakers, then there is light at the end of that tunnel. But ultimately, you will see the results, both academically and in terms of the well-being of your staff, of your colleagues, of your pupils. So it's worth putting that effort in. And I think if anybody watches the replay, or, you know, has been in here and thinks, well, you know, but I'm not a school leader, what can I do? The important thing is, in the book as well, I give an example of somebody called Paul Bateson, who was this lone warrior in his school in terms of what he did on a project on kindness. You have to start somewhere. So even if you're not in a leadership position, you can lead the way by just doing small things that demonstrate that this stuff works. And gradually you will bring people on board. You know, leadership is not just about being a school leader in title. Leadership can happen at all levels. Students can be leaders, and you know, teaching assistants can be leaders, etc. It's about leading the way, showing the way, and doing what you believe in, and showing that it works. So
that's brilliant, and yeah, so we've all got a part to play, and I encourage people to read your books, particularly the For Flourishing Sakes. Gives some very,
there you go.
Thank you. That's some very practical examples that are really worth embedding in your own practice. So I commend that to people to read.
Yeah, and some great comments from Jane there as well. I can see in terms of her doctoral research as well, and yeah, pupil voice and child advocates, that's a very important point. So thank you for that, Jane. Yeah,
and we know the strength of children working with and for each other is quite often stronger than the sort of adult population leading on things. So getting children as advocates and working as child coaches is very strong within environments.
Absolutely.
Fred, can I just thank you for your input this afternoon?
Absolute pleasure.
Is there anything that you particularly wanted to sort of leave us with? You mentioned, did you want to say something just before we finish, or do you
yeah,
want
I'll just mention the book offer, because obviously you very kindly said some lovely things about my book, so I thought I would put up an offer for people who've attended this workshop, and also, you know, people who've signed up and were perhaps not able to actually attend. They will all get the email, I'm assuming, that Nikki will send out, which will have the details of this offer as well. And people who are watching this webinar back in the replay, you know, do take up the offer. There's a link there, and it'll come straight to me, and you can order copies at 10% discount. But what I would also say is, you know, because I could only really scratch the surface today of some of the examples. There's examples from all over the world in terms of what's been happening in schools. And if you want to sort of buy them in bulk for your local education authority schools, or for staff in your school, etc., then get in touch with me as well, because I can arrange that with discounts to be discussed, etc., depending on volume, and I can arrange for the publisher to send them straight to you as well. So I can do all of that, and not just for this book, but for my other books as well, and the character strengths cards as well. So do get in touch. And if you want the Challenger Multi-Academy Trust report as well, my contact details will be in the email that Nikki will send out, and I'll get in touch with me and I'll send that out to you. So
that's brilliant. Thank you, Fred. And I commend that practice to, you know, so if you're watching this and you want to do something with your staff, there's nothing more significant that you can do would be to create a book theme for a period and get a whole staff body to read a book together, because it, you know, you'll see the impact in the staff room, you'll see the impact in the classroom very quickly. So I commend that, not just because it would support Fred in selling the book, but I've seen it over this, particularly over the pandemic period, where staff are buying a single book, reading it together, keeping them together, growing conversations. So whether it be for Flourishing's Sake with Frederica Roberts, or Paul Dix, When Adults Change, or a book of significant fiction. I know something that Black Lives Matters in schools, that they've got involved in some books that on that theme, which have been really impactful in both changing culture and language, and having a positive impact on staff. So I commend that practice to you if you're able to do that and you're watching and you think that might be valuable to you. Just to conclude, just want to say, just sharing a screen, not quite the same technology that Fred's just used with us, but coming up in December, we've got Susan Fieldham coming to do a completely different webinar on school finances. Originally, we talked about calling it school finances for the petrified, but really it's because the people, you know, given the fact we've been talking about well-being, this is an issue that causes great stress within staffing in school. And Susan Fieldham is a national expert, works with the DFE and some of the teaching associations on school finance as a qualified accountant, but also is very embedded in what is happening within schools. So our next theme is going to be looking at school finance management within schools, particularly at this time is very relevant. So come along and share with us if you're around. Watch out on Eventbrite. We will be advertising the details soon. But can I just say thank you again to Fred for what she's done this afternoon. It's been a great session. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
And hopefully we'll see you again soon.